right, so introducing Ray Nelson. God, Ray, how long have we known each other?
You know what? I've known you, Gary, and Evolve IP for well over 12 years. All right.
Wow.
I worked with you before I even worked at Intelisys. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Ray Nelson. I'm the Senior Vice President of the Technical Sales and Services team. But my introduction to Gary, all right, was at the Franklin Mint about 12 years ago, maybe 13 years ago, in Philadelphia. And Gary was dressed up. He was the color man for a presentation. He was dressed up as Ben Franklin. And I have to share this picture. All right. Hopefully you guys can see that. Did it pop up on the screen?
Now you're embarrassing me, Ray.
Beautiful.
All right. Why I didn't run from Evolve IP and Gary way back then, I have no idea. But why I didn't run is because Evolve IP had always been a champion of DaaS. All right. It's one of the biggest claims to fame. And what I loved about it, and what I love about it today, is that they attacked it from real-time communications as well as their desktop, and they used it to be able to expand an opportunity. And today they do that, right? To me, DaaS hasn't reached its potential yet. There's a lot of factors changing that, right? One, how we work today, right? It's no longer in the office all the time. We work from anywhere. Big part of what ScanSource is all about, right? My wife, as an example, goes to the office 3 days a week and 2 days a week. She's remote. DaaS plays into that so well. And there's other things driving desktop as a service, right? Cybersecurity, big factor that really plays into desktop as a service. New devices, right? People are working on all sorts of devices, from iPads to laptops to Chromebooks. DaaS is the perfect fit for that, right? In the last year, Intelisys and Evolve IP have closed some tremendous opportunities. And I just see that. I'm so excited because I just see it continuing to the future, right? And I don't want to steal all of the thunder from you, Gary, and team. So you know what? I'm going to turn it over. Gary, take it away from here.
Outstanding. Thank you, Ray. I appreciate it. I don't appreciate the picture, but I can guess there was some humor in that one as well. So, nobody on this call but Ray and I probably go to as many channel events as we do. And one of the things that I notice on every channel event is there's 10 new security companies selling a better mousetrap. So we're going to talk about DaaS as a security solution. And then Ryan's going to walk you through the financials. And we're going to talk about DaaS as a better solution for DR. As Ray mentioned, the devices have changed. So we're going to talk about what devices will run on DaaS. Then I'm going to take it back over for just 2 slides to talk about DaaS and its ability to be a better solution for remote contact center agents. When Ryan takes back over, we're going to give you the general, the Reader's Digest version. What problems does DaaS solve? And then in this whole deck, there's 1 slide about us, and that's the why Evolve IP for DaaS. Then we're going to shift back to you guys and tell you why you should do that, what's in it for you. And then we're going to introduce something which is a really exciting new product called Office in a Box. Ryan, I hope you know that that's got some Philly humor in it, that slide. So with that said, I'm going to introduce you to Ryan Lindsay, and Ryan, take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. And I hope you get feeling better soon here. And even though, while you might not be big, you do have big shoes to fill. So hopefully I do you justice here as we flip through this today. So let's go ahead and start off. So just to look at what is DaaS, right? Be very simplistic with this as we're going through the presentation. And normally I'd open it up for questions throughout, but I know we have a larger audience today. So if you do have questions while we're going through the presentation, as Zach mentioned, go ahead and pop them in the chat. But let's just back it up for a little bit and say, what is DaaS, right? So if I'm looking at this screen here, this is your traditional laptop that you go purchase from Best Buy. Now, $2,500, we'll call this a corporate PC, and there's probably a little bit more of expenses that go into it as well. Well, let's break down what's actually inside of this laptop here, right? We have a Dell Latitude 9000 Intel Core i7, 16 gigabits of memory, 256 gigabits of SSD. What does that mean? Well, your Intel Core i7 is your CPU. Your 16 gigabits of memory is your RAM. Your 256 gigabytes of SSD is your disk. And you have a Windows 10 operating system that's also loaded on top of that PC. Let's take CPU, let's take RAM, let's take disk, and let's take an operating system and deploy that either in a private cloud server or in a public cloud server. And that's DaaS. It's pretty simple. It is a desktop that is hosted inside of a server, whether it's in a public cloud environment, such as Azure, AWS, Google, or inside of a private cloud environment, such as Evolve IP's data centers. So now we've looked a little bit about what DaaS is, right? How do we begin to sell DaaS? And the difference between capital expenditures of hardware infrastructure and PCs versus the OpEx predictable operating cost spin of DaaS and as a service model, right? And for a lot of us in our space and in our ecosystem, as Gary mentioned earlier, we've been doing this for a while, right? And we go back to, we started in the world of the network, right? And we started selling circuits, T1s, the access component. And we all had to make this transition, this pivot to now selling UCaaS, right? And even before then, we started making the transition into voice just in general. And we were selling the Mitels, the ShoreTels, the Avayas, insert your on-premise based phone system here, right? And we had to make the pivot to come into selling UC as a service. And it's the same thing now in this world of DaaS and infrastructure, right? There is the hardware refresh cycle that's very vicious, and IT leaders still have to go through today. They have to budget for a 3 to 4 year huge capex spend when they have to go replace 300 laptops inside of the field, or when they have to go update legacy servers that they bought 5 years ago that are now nickel and diming them. Well, what if they had an alternative to have this OpEx predictable operating costs and actually have the support and resources to deploy faster than having to update every 3 years? And that's really what we get into when you start seeing this world of DaaS and how do you sell it. It is replacing the traditional CapEx of upfront spend on hardware and infrastructure with a true as a service provider that's going to give you additional resources, the latest and greatest technology available at the clicks of your fingertips. And I think the biggest thing to hit on too here is predictable operating cost. Raymond was mentioning earlier, the state of our work environment has changed, right? And I think pre-pandemic, folks were kind of dibbling their toe in the world of cloud, right? And then the pandemic hit and everybody rushed to it, which was great. And the fact that we were able to enable end users to do so, but what they didn't expect was the cost that came out with it too, right? So I know a lot of folks, we get up against the do-it-yourself. Some IT leaders or some of your customers are saying, "Hey, we're going to do this internally, in-house," but then they start losing grasp on what those costs really look like. So DaaS is another alternative to really give them a fixed, predictable cost that they can budget for as they continue to expand their business practice. Is DaaS an alternative desktop strategy, or is it a security solution? The answer is, spoiler alert, it's both, right? I like to use the analogy of a used car, right? Recently this year, actually, I had an '04 Honda Pilot. It was so good to me. I got about 300,000 miles on it. And finally, it hit that point to where it started nickel and diming me. And eventually, this last year, I had to go out and get a new car. As Gary knows, now I drive a Tesla, right? And when it needs updating, I just pull it into the driveway, connect to my Wi-Fi, and it pushes out all the updates that I need. Well, it's the same thing with DaaS, right? DaaS is built natively inside of the cloud, inside of the data center, whether it's private or public, right? And so when new releases for security improvement measures are available, are automatically updated and pushed out to the customers and end users, and there's no longer for the business to be reliant on individuals to make sure that the buttons have been pushed and that the holes have been patched. So it's a very simple way to improve your security posture for any corporate business out there.
So I just want to add something real quick, if I could. Um, it's interesting as I go to these events. Um, I'm noticing that one of the smart tactics is bring us to a customer. We'll do a free vulnerability analysis. Well, the moment you take your PC that they provisioned for you in the office and plug it into your at-home unsecured cable broadband, you've got a vulnerability, which then enables the security company to sell you a solution that you may still need, but sooner or later, to Ryan's point, instead of plugging holes in all those vulnerabilities, you will get an alternative desktop solution, and that will be DaaS. And that's really the direction that we're going here. Sorry, Ryan.
And Raymond, please feel free. I know Gary will do it. I don't have to tell him; he'll feel free to jump in. But Raymond, if there's any points you want to add on top as well, please feel free to add too. So we'll move along from security and move into the financial conversation. Right? And I think the biggest topic and rebuttal I always hear from both partners and sometimes from customers, I think customers are really coming around to it a lot more, but it's the DaaS is too expensive. In fact, Zach and I have an upcoming Monday morning Mythbusters that we're going to be releasing later this month to go deeper into that topic. But I know everybody loves a good TCO model, a good ROI. So let's just take a look at the financials when it comes to DaaS versus the traditional PC cost. Right off the top, looking at hardware, we have a $1,200, $2,500, PC or laptop per individual versus a $40 to $70 per month per user cost. Now, the easy, simple math would say, hey, take that cost of the PC, divide it by the cost of the DaaS seat per month per user, and walk away with a comparable ROI or total cost. But that's not truly the case, right? And I think what a lot of people miss is that everything is truly included with the DaaS seat. So now let's take a look at the financials when you start comparing the provisioning that it takes for IT administrator to spend on loading things like antiviruses, web filtering, MFA, all the software that goes into that corporate PC. We're not even including the procurement timeline and shipping that it would cost there. And God forbid they forget to put a piece of software on there, because now your new hire is shipping back that laptop and is going to be without productivity for another week or so. Start looking at the cost of a VPN. As Gary mentioned earlier, that goes away. You're natively built inside of the cloud. You no longer need a VPN to connect into your corporate business applications like ERP systems or CRMs, right? The maintenance that is associated with desktops and servers, that goes away. As I mentioned earlier, that capital expenditure for PC or server refreshes that you'd have to do every 3 years and write six-figure checks for, that goes away. The PCs that you put out into the field to the contact center agent that was only onboarded and stayed with the business for 3 weeks before they got riffed and brought in another batch of folks to take on the role, and they took that device with them and sold it on eBay, that goes away. All of these costs that are associated with standing up PC, VPN, or private infrastructure are all included with the DaaS or a non-factor, right? It's really simple when you start looking at the true TCO ROIs of moving to the as a service model, the OpEx model versus that traditional CapEx as we spoke about earlier.
It's also worth adding, and I think this is one of those things that people think about. When was the last time you went to Best Buy, bought a PC, took it out of the box and plugged it in, right? It takes 3 to 4 hours to provision every PC. And when you're paying your IT guy $150,000 a year, 4 hours of their time is $400. Sorry, Ryan.
No, that's great. I think that's, in my opinion too, that's the one area that's not even listed here. But if you put a big circle around all of this and then put ongoing support, right? I think that's, one of those areas that is not factored into this financial analysis, but most certainly is another included benefit of having a service provider for desktops or DaaS. So continuing on into the benefits of DaaS, is DaaS a better solution for disaster recovery and business continuity? Well, you know, things happen, I'll say it. Gary would probably use a different word, more like happens, right? But once your customers move to a full DaaS solution, they can start resting easy knowing that they can ensure business continuity not only for their end users, but also for all their corporate data. Even in the cases of events like acts of God, right? The floods that are hitting Philly right now up in the Northeast, Gary said somebody probably walked into this on Monday. Hardware failure. We've all dropped a laptop or left it on the back of an airplane too. So that's individual hardware failure. The next pandemic, right? I mean, this type of thing is going to happen again. It's, one of those not if but when. And when you're in a DaaS environment, these all become a thing of the past. You're no longer reliant on PCs or servers. You're no longer reliant on VPNs. You're no longer reliant on individuals to make sure that things don't go bump in the night. So there's this peace of mind that also comes to both IT security leaders of the business.
Right. I see this as one of the major things about DaaS, right? Having a whole staff of engineers, if their laptop gets crushed because they're traveling, fire up another device. You can't do that unless you have DaaS. And all of the data is centrally located. And I just, to me, I feel this is probably one of the biggest driving factors for DaaS, but that's just me.
You're spot on. And, we haven't hit it yet, but I know it's coming later. But layer in things like compliances now too, right? HIPAA, PCI. These things happen. How are you suited to quickly transition to, never lose a step, but also maintain those types of compliances that are regulated down on to your business? And this is where DaaS becomes another great play when it comes to disaster recovery, business continuity, security, and more importantly, compliance to business. And to your point, what devices will run on DaaS? And I think I saw a question in the chat too with the objection of nobody spends over K anymore. I think there's some truth to that. You can go out there and procure the lower end devices, and that's another great use case for DaaS. And in some cases, people still need to buy higher end machines to meet the requirements of their software, like AutoCAD or things of that nature. So I think there's some certain objection handling that we'd be happy to have further conversation with. But when you start talking about what devices will run on DaaS, you have your tablets, your iPads, you have your thin clients, right? You have your zero clients, even your traditional towers and PCs, mobile devices. Gary says even your Xbox One. I mean, that's just pretty amazing. But it doesn't really matter what device you're deploying DaaS on, as long as you have connectivity to the internet, and it doesn't have to be a high amount of connectivity either, right? Keep in mind the only thing that you're passing back and forth over the actual bandwidth is your keystroke entry, right? Everything else is living natively inside of the data center. So as long as you have a monitor to visually see what's being hosted inside of that data center and that golden image that's residing there, and you have a keyboard to interact with it, that's all you need. So maybe it's not a replacement for local devices or PCs, but it's the ability to buy lower end devices or PCs, so that, to Jack's question earlier, now we can get away with a $175 machine for 8 years versus a $600 machine for 3.
It's funny. I wanted to comment on Jack's comment too, because when we put this together, I'm using some Google stats. And yeah, we hear from clients all the time saying they're paying $800 for PCs. The fact is it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you buy and how long you keep it. It's not gold. State of the art in 2023 is also known as garbage in 2030. So, no matter what in the PC environment, regardless of what you pay, you will replace it. You will need to refresh it. And that's where we're seeing DaaS making a significant difference. Mr. Lindsay, back to you.
Hey, before you jump on, I want to hit on this because again, I've known you guys for 12 years, and I flash back when we started engaging 12 years ago with you, we were coming out of a recession, right? But a lot of the times customers came to us because they didn't want to spend dollars to upgrade their hardware infrastructure, right? Their laptops. So they were using DaaS as an economic way to provide more power because all the compute's in the cloud, right? And, so they could run DaaS on lower end hardware, not have to upgrade that hardware. Interesting how you started this whole conversation, because if we go into a recession, I almost see that playing again, right? Where customers are going to say, I don't want to spend a lot of capital expenditure upgrading my hardware. I'll leverage DaaS to be able to give that power to the end user to be able to do the compute that I need. Hopefully that makes sense.
And it does. And there's one other thing that's very interesting too, that I want to jog on to Jack's comment, which is usually when you come to a bump in the road, you need more RAM, you need more CPU, you're going to get a new device. Most of that stuff is very difficult to get access to. Those components that Ryan covered earlier in the presentation, you need 8 more gigs of RAM. That's a phone call and an ad. You need more CPU. That's now getting resources on demand. Another benefit over the PC conversation. Go ahead, Ryan.
Hey, you just finish on this note, because I think I'd be remiss if I didn't add it. We're in the new world of the gig economy, right? In case you guys haven't noticed, there's 6 different generations inside the workforce today, right? And not everybody wants to run off the same device, and a lot of folks have their own devices. Let's not forget the world of BYOD, the ability to bring your own device. That is a huge area where we're seeing a lot of traction and demand for DaaS in our marketplace today. Businesses coming in saying, hey, I no longer want to buy any devices. I still need to be able to deliver some type of device for my employees to contact or connect back into my business applications. But I want to enable them to bring their own device. DaaS is the perfect solution for a gig worker, contact center agent, or any business looking to enable a bring your own device business practice. So I will end with that as we head into the world of CX. And with Gary, he's going to take you through a CX experience that he recently had and how DaaS was a great solution for one of the problems and challenges that he had ran into.
Am I up?
You're up, sir.
All right. Bear with me, guys. Just want to flip over to this. I'll tell you a story, because that's what I do. The old CX gone wrong story. That's me getting my T-Mobile bill and realized that I have been paying for the last 25 years, $20 a month for handset insurance that I'll never use. So if you're a T-Mobile subscriber, you know that you grab your phone, you dial 611, an auto attendant answers and says, hi, Gary, how can I help you today? Wow. They called me by my name. Well, I'm talking to a machine, so I give them a one-word answer, billing. And then they come back and say, no problem. Enter your PIN number so we can authenticate you. Wow, that's cool. I do that, and then they say, hey, we don't want you to sit on hold for 40 minutes. We're busy without losing your place in line. We got this cool thing called Q callback. We'll call you back in 40 minutes. Press 1 to continue. So far, this is a 10. 40 minutes later, like magic, my phone rings. It's T-Mobile. And of course, it's funny about when you know a thing or two about a thing or two. As soon as the agent said hello, I knew I was talking to somebody not in the United States. And of course, the dead giveaway on this was the rooster that went cock-a-doodle-doo in the background. Any event, though, the agent comes on, says, hi, Gary, I have your account in front of me, reminding me that she was calling me by my name, that I had been previously authenticated. Now I tell her I want to remove handset insurance. And she says, no problem, but I'll need to access the billing system. Please hold. And then the problem started. She says, my systems are running slow. Would you mind holding? Now, again, this is my business, so I know a thing or two about a thing or two. And one of the problems is I know that she's trying to get to a billing system running on a private server in Bellevue, Washington. And what's holding her up is her inability to get onto that Cisco VPN client. So let's shift everything over to the right. And what happens? After 40 minutes on hold, she comes back and says, sorry for the delay. I've been able to remove that charge. Anything else I can help you with? No. And then here's the real problem. T-Mobile wanted me to rate that call. And up until the point that she couldn't get to her $20 VPN client, this thing would have been a 10. Think about it. They recognized me. They employed Q callback. They authenticated me. It carried all the way through. But then I waited on hold to get a $20 charge removed for 40 minutes. So they got the score of a 1. Now, how would DaaS have solved that? There's your caller. There's your agent, left to right. CX, customer experience, is more than just connecting the caller to the agent. It's about providing those agents with access to the tools that they really need to solve customer problems, like the billing system, like the order management system. So in our DaaS environment, we can stand up anybody's contact center. We have customers running Five9, customers running Ring, customers running Avaya, customers running NICE, customers running Genesis. They're not obligated to use me as a contact center provider. Of course, we've got to concern ourselves with security. So we're going to authenticate them via their Active Directory, and we're going to enable multi-factor authentication. Then we're going to deliver them a virtual desktop. But what's cool about a virtual desktop that doesn't require a VPN is I'm going to bring them online access to their client server applications and their SaaS applications. So if you think about it, we're not only giving the client and the agent access to whatever contact center platform they're using today, but to all those internal client server applications, right? All without a VPN or the need to go buy them an expensive PC. That's pretty cool. So with that, let me give this thing back to you.
So we kind of starting to tell end of things here. What problems does DaaS solve? And Gary walked you through a huge one as it relates to CX. Click over here. And earlier we talked about the mobility aspect, right? Being able to work from anywhere, hybrid work. That's not going anywhere. In fact, it's almost a requirement now for employers to bring folks on board. They want, people want to have this hybrid work option or alternative at least available to them. The ability to access SAP applications or corporate resources from any device in any location, regardless of what type of connectivity is available to you, and then being able to ensure that security posture while doing so. And be able to do so without the need to purchase a new PC, right? The ability to extend that life of the hardware, or as I mentioned earlier, buy a lower end PC, or even enable a bring your own device business practice. Increase the productivity, right? And enable your IT staff to focus on strategic initiatives rather than the reactive, tactical ones that come into their help desk inbox every day. Again, this is a fully baked as a service solution. So this comes with in-house support, an extension of the IT team, and resources available to them to leverage for desktop support. Time to implement and support, minutes and hours instead of days and weeks. So start factoring that into your TCOs and your ROIs as you think about how many fully staffed IT folks and system admins you would need in order to support a solution like DaaS versus going with a service provider like Evolve IP. I also like to include the productivity aspect of your employees. Gary mentioned the bad customer experience that he had trying to, work with the contact center agent, going back and forth over their order management system on a low end VPN connection. Start thinking about doctors or engineers, right? Folks trying to work on architecture build outs and losing 4 hours of work because they're not able to download or upload their files, right? Productivity in the sense of the employee matters as well. And then lastly, security. With DaaS, the endpoint doesn't matter. So now we are minimizing that attack surface by reducing the need for endpoint security. And as I mentioned before, a lot of the security posture is already baked into a DaaS environment. We'll get to that here in a second. That data stays natively inside of the data center. It's never leaving. It is encrypted inside of the data center, and so is the encryption tunnel that you're coming in to access it through. So no matter if your data is in transit or at rest, it's always secure and able to access remotely without the need of a VPN. So why Evolve IP for desktop as a service? I came to Evolve IP from Ericsson, as Gary mentioned earlier, and I competed against them for 4 years or so. And where I always fell short was not having the different flavors. And what I think is really neat about Evolve IP is you have the ability to deploy, when it comes to protocol, either Citrix or VMware, depending on the customer's need of published applications or persistent desktops. You have the ability to deploy inside of a private cloud infrastructure, that being Evolve IP's 2 data centers in the East Coast and the West Coast, or the ability to deploy in a public environment such as Microsoft Azure, right? So the multiple flavors that can actually be built out to best suit the customer's need and requirements is a huge advantage of Evolve IP and when to leverage us for your DaaS solutions. The other aspect is this real-time audio and video, RTAV optimization. Bring your own UCaaS, bring your own CCaaS. We're the experts at delivering real-time audio and video inside of a virtual desktop. I saw somebody in the chat talk about how printing, used to be kludgy or clunky. And that's true. Anything inside of a virtual environment never used to be a great experience. Sometimes even typing was horrible. Now, fast forward to 2023, we can do device redirection for your printers, and it's not a bad experience at all. We can also do audio and video redirection, and now we're running full video contact center type of calls inside of a virtual desktop is no longer a challenge. Mentioned earlier to Ray's comment about the ability to deploy secure and compliant infrastructure and PCs, right? Whether it's PCI, HIPAA, SOC, or even high trust. These types of certifications can now be adhered to when inside of a virtual environment, and when new updates are needed to be made or to the protocols, we're able to easily go out and deploy those and push them out without having to have a huge forklift. And lastly, again, we are the second largest hosting provider and a premier in the US and a premier Citrix CSP. We're also a global CSP with Microsoft, and we're noted in every Gartner DaaS market guide since the inception. So what's in it for you as the partner, right? Mention what comes in a DaaS cell. Well, we know that there's going to be servers and infrastructure, whether that's private or public. There's going to be a Windows operating system and sometimes licensing that's included with that. In fact, what should come with the DaaS cell is that O365 or M365 E3, E5 licensing, some antivirus, probably some web filtering. They're always going to need MFA because everybody needs MFA now today. There's going to be backup components and probably some RMM. What else could be included is the DRaaS play. You're also probably going to need Microsoft Voice. And there's likelihood, especially in the world of contact center BPOs, that you're going to need some CX in there and enable it to run inside of a virtual environment. Gary, the one slide that wasn't included in this deck was my favorite one, the quadrant slide that really shows all the different services that Evolve IP offers. But this was a big differentiator for me when I made the jump out of a standalone DaaS provider to come to a holistic work from anywhere enterprise solution provider. And our ability to really pull together these different, not just the big logos, but these different services in general and put them on one sheet of paper, one support team to support is a huge differentiator for Evolve IP. And I think that's why we think DaaS really moves the needles. We did a study on our top 50 customers that we sold in the last 5 years. We looked at where they started with their initial order and where did they grow. And over a 5-year turn, we saw 160% growth rate in our top 50 customers. An average deal size of 17.3 ended up growing to 44K.
Hey, you know what? A little plug for my friends at Intelisys. They want that quadrant. They should be out coming to the big cloud event next week in Salt Lake City, because we'll be there, right?
Yeah, we're wrapping up the masterclass tour with the Cloud Masterclass out in Park City. So if you haven't already, definitely jump on in, register, and get out to Park City and hang with Themis and Gary and I and team. We'll be out there.
Thanks for the plug, Gary. And I did see somebody asked about deeper training, beyond yourselves. That training will get into things like this. So thanks.
Yep. So I'll wrap it up here, Gary. I'm going to take your Philly humor and go with this with or without. I got to honestly come on and say I've never had a Philly cheesesteak. So I get the humor, but I think I'm missing out on something even more important here.
The cheesesteak.
The cheesesteak. But I got to tell you, man, just as I was mentioning, this is huge. It's such a differentiator. I think it's something that the industry has been asking for a long time, a true office in a box solution. And Evolve IP has all of the services and has partnered with the right providers to now offer this office in a box. So this with or without, here it is, hot off the press, introducing the new DaaS bundle. So for a 100-seat user minimum, $99 a month, you're going to get a dedicated virtual 8 gig desktop. You're going to get three different virtual servers, Active Directory, domain controller storage, additional storage of over 1.1 terabytes. You're going to get Veeam backup for each individual end user, Microsoft 365 E3 license, a Microsoft Teams direct routing seat, and a full security stack powered by Trend Micro, Enable, Cisco Umbrella, and a managed firewall. I personally think this is still, again, going into the concept of people who says DaaS is expensive. I don't believe that. And if you go to look at the without, take away the Microsoft licensing, a lot of times folks already have their Microsoft license procured or they have an EA agreement in place. Great. Price just went down. $68.99. Get the full suite of services, virtual desktop, server, storage, backup, security, your collaboration tools and voice, all on one single sheet of paper, all with one support team that's going to act as an extension of that IT team for your clients. Simplify it, simplify the cost, predictable cost. This is a very compelling offer if you're asking me personally. Love to hear your guys' feedback as we're wrapping it up. I know we're kind of short on time and do want to hit to the Q&A. Lastly, I'll end with this. We have up to a 4x MRR bonus with our current Q3 incentive programs. Pick your product, pick your term, and that's going to dictate what type of spiff will be paid out. But I think this is pretty compelling as well. I personally don't know of another provider in this space that's paying a 4x spiff on DaaS, and we love to see those types of wins come across our desk when they do. Also, for all UC services, whether it's voice, Teams, WebEx, or CCAS, there's also an opportunity to earn over a 4x spiff there. So I'm going quick. I know we're short on time. Just a reminder, desktop services, all the services that Evolve IP has to offer. We have desktop services, which is the main conversation of today's webinar, collaboration communication tools such as Microsoft Teams direct routing, Cisco WebEx, any type of business messaging. We have our own proprietary contact center suite that we offer, ECS, that is powered and enabled to integrate with both Microsoft Teams and Cisco WebEx. And don't forget to leverage DaaS to improve any type of CX practice that your customers have out there today. Enable virtual desktops to run applications like Five9, Nice and Contact, Talkdesk, Genesys, doesn't matter. We're here to bring the parity of contact center and those business applications together and make sure that end users, regardless of their locations across the globe, have access to them. So with
And that's
that,
the one.
I'll
That's
wrap.
the one we want to leave up, Ryan. Give guys a chance to take that picture.
You got it. I will wrap it up, and I will give everybody the opportunity. Scan this QR code. This is the link to our new Office in the Box data sheet. I again think this is the most compelling offer that I've seen in the world of DaaS and in the world of enterprise solutions in a long time. Love to get your feedback or input. And so if you have any questions, comments, the latter, please be sure to reach out to our team or your local channel director. With that being said, Gary, thanks for allowing me the opportunity to be on here with you and Ray today. I'm really looking forward to seeing everybody at this masterclass event and then with Intelisys out in Park City. And Zach, I'll turn it back to you, man. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Let's touch on Jack Mulligan's question about, I know we covered it a little bit, but other than engineering laptops, we never spend over $1,000 on those laptops anymore. Are we seeing that as Evolve IP as an objection?
I don't see it as an objection. I see it come up. People definitely state that, we're not paying that much for a laptop. And as I was mentioning too, I think it's dependent on vertical. It's dependent on, architecture and engineering firms are certainly spending that much. Media groups are certainly spending that much, sometimes north of $7,000 a machine. So moving into a DaaS environment at $99 a user is a lot more compelling. The other thing is
I'm sorry, Jack. I also wanted to mention, I don't know if you know Mike Davis, really good guy. Mike is working on a TCO calculator. Like I said earlier, you want the number to be $800. You want the refresh cycle to be 7 years. We want all that stuff to be. I don't know where Mike's at. We sent him some examples of stuff that our engineering team uses, but I was chatting privately with Mike Davis about this of having that TCO tool, and I know he's working on something that I think will be a lot more universal. So, like I mentioned earlier, how much the device costs is really not relevant. It's just going to be replaced.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I would say to answer your question, is it a rebuttal that we hear? Yes. Is it one that we can easily overcome? Absolutely. Do we have tools available to help you have those conversations? Yes. So hopefully that helps answer the question. And Zach, looks like we lost you on video, but hopefully you're still there to moderate.
All right. So Jack also asked, we have an old school sales engineer on staff. He thinks DaaS is clunky when it comes to printing. I think we covered that a little bit, but he's asking if that's outdated thinking.
Yep, that is definitely no longer a challenge, as I mentioned. In fact, we can set up, your DaaS environment to do things like, pick up local network redirect, right, and pick up any device, even USB devices or USB printers, if they're not mapped to the network. So, no longer is that a challenge, and in fact, it's very easy to map devices in a virtual environment.
And I'll add to that the 3 misnomers about modern DaaS is you can't run video and HD audio. Take that one off the table. You can't run DaaS with multiple screens. Take that one off the table. And DaaS is kludgy and clunky when it comes to external peripherals. Take that off the table. Next question, Zach.
Is DaaS a contract?
If DaaS is a contract means is it as a service? Yes, it's your traditional, monthly service. Typically, we see 3-year contract terms in our offering. Can we adjust those contract terms based upon the customer's requirements or needs? Absolutely. But yes, it is a service subscription model.
Okay. Jacob Kaufman, I hope that answers that. Jack Mulligan again, I think I'm hearing this as being a great alternative to a hardware refresh. Fair?
That is very fair and absolutely. In fact, that's one of the kind of impending events that should perk your ears up a little bit. If you have customers going through a hardware refresh or have one upcoming, definitely insert the DaaS conversation then and there. Get us engaged. We're happy to help with those conversations.
Because they can just continue to use those old devices. Is that right?
Yeah, because we can either extend out that hardware refresh, or as they're looking to even bring in new devices, we can minimize the cost of whatever that type of refresh may be, or maybe even offset some of the cost, whether it's infrastructure or devices at the local end users. perspective. Doesn't matter when you hear hardware refresh, get us engaged and get us on the call.
All right. Michael Olinger asks, what target market has been the most successful with DaaS based on, industry, user count, public versus private? And he asked about private equity.
That's the big one, private equity. There's a lot of roll-ups going on right now, especially in things like medical. Nobody wants to integrate the existing crap that they're acquiring. They want a fixed price, and that's where that bundle really comes into play. Obviously, we see it. We see it with a lot of retail. We see it with a lot of manufacturing. Ryan, what else are you saying?
Yeah, well, the contact center BPOs, right? Contact center BPOs, anybody looking to enable remote or hybrid workforce, healthcare with all the HIPAA compliant requirements that come into play. Those are all great verticals. And then also the architecture and engineering, folks that need the ability to access high GPU types of applications.
And to expand on that, I'm dropping in a new asset that we just got back into the chat, and it's going to talk about, use cases, verticals, all that stuff. So check that out in the chat. Anthony Martello was asking about getting more into security. I don't know if we covered that a ton, but do you have any quick commentary about?
Anthony, I'd say schedule time with us and we can go deeper on the security aspect of it. I've seen a ton of questions pop in, so definitely want to get to everybody. But if you reach out to myself or Gary, we'll schedule a time to have the security conversation with you.
All right. Johnny Edmond asked about, so he basically said, DaaS can be cost effective for some organizations and it might not be the case for others, but especially if the organization already has heavily invested in on-prem infrastructure. So he's asking, what is the sweet spot for the number of users, size of the organization, et cetera?
I'd say 250 to about 1,500 is probably the sweet spot. Sometimes even getting a little bit lower than the 250. The problem is, I believe with DaaS, you start going north of 3,000 users, you start seeing they have an in-house practice for this already, right? But sub 3,000 users, greater than 100, that's really a huge sweet spot for us. And again, as I like to state is that we want to be an extension of the IT team. So even if they already have some of that stuff built in-house, I know I worked with a client who they had Citrix clusters all over the place, but they were so inundated with trying to manage it themselves. Like, somebody go, please find us a service provider for this. They offloaded that to us. We now manage all of that for them. And we freed up about 4 full-time employees for them to go focus on other initiatives.
Now, the one thing I want to just add on to Johnny's question is there's got to be a floor. The floor is 50. And the reason being is with really tiny companies, they hear all this great stuff about DaaS, and to them that says, oh, I can get rid of my IT guy. And that is never the case. You do need an on-site IT resource. So not the sweet spot, but the minimum is 50.
Sean Bloyer asks, for a TCO, how do you factor in the cost of public versus private cloud?
This is a great question. And when you start factoring, you really have to start looking at things like egress, right? I mean, that's the thing. When you start looking in the world of public cloud, buyers went out there and started enabling these things. Microsoft Azure was giving away virtual desktops for free for the first month. And then come that second month, when they got that first bill, it was the shock and awe factor, right? So there are different components and very different models that you need to be sure that you have your assumptions right on when you're doing an analysis on public versus private. We have assets and tools that we're able to provide you to assist with that type of conversation, but they are definitely not an apples to apples comparison. And both yourself and buyers should be aware of that. And if you want to dive in more on that specific topic, we can bring in the right folks to have that conversation with you and provide you with those tools and assets.
And I want to add one thing to that too. When do you have to use Azure? When you got overseas people. But it's very important to understand that as a sales partner, this is a Microsoft resale. The financials to you are dramatically different than if this is deployed in our private environment. So you do need to be aware of that.
All right. Next one was, is it practical to evolve a customer over to DaaS? Meaning move users over to DaaS as their PCs reach end of life?
Individual users, no, we wouldn't do that. But if you had a subset of the business, and sometimes I see this is where it happens, right? Maybe it's not the whole organization, but it's a customer support or billing department that needs to be moved over. That's a great starting point, and we can start with those users first and gradually grow with the business and expand with them. But for individual users, individual machines, as they're coming out of out of life or out of cycle, that's not going to be a good fit for us. But if there's a batch of users, yes.
All right. Carol Bell asked, healthcare vertical, encryption PCs. Can you also provide iPads?
So again, we're not in the device management business, but we can provide encrypted PCs in the cloud that are enabled to run on iPads. Again, they can run on any devices. We're talking about virtual machines that all live inside of either private or public cloud infrastructure. All that compliance is maintained inside of there, and you can run it on any device that you want to bring to the table and not have to worry about compromising that compliance.
All right. Rob Croteau asks, do you see DaaS often in offshore engineering / software development teams as a play?
All the time. That's a great vertical. I have had many customers and use cases specific to that. Feel free to reach out to me directly if you want to dive in deeper on that conversation. I'll grab your channel director and happy to chime in. Huge vertical.
Do we offer trial periods for our skeptics out there?
What the funniest thing about DaaS is people say, I need a demo. Well, it's like hitting the start button on your PC. There's nothing to demo unless your data's on there. So to trial it means what? You're going to get some generic Office 365 account and Internet Explorer. The better answer to that question is trial, sure. But what's the word I'm looking for?
Proof of concept.
Proof of, that's really what we want. I'm having a hard time with my P's. Yeah, proof of concept is the way to go on this, because this way they're actually using their production environment. It's more complicated than say, sure, try this useless desktop for a week. So we want to have these conversations, but proof of concept is the way to go.
Yep.
Craig Wilson asks if we have any college or universities on our platform that he could use for reference material, as he has a prospect with remote users for online education courses that require bandwidth in DING areas. Would DaaS be a good solution for the university?
Yeah, it absolutely would, Craig. In fact, my former business, Stratusworks, that was acquired by Ericsson, started off as it was actually developed for the University of Madison, Wisconsin, to specifically address this issue. And in fact, I've outfitted a couple of universities in the good state of Texas too. So there's a lot of great use cases. That's a spot on, a dead ringer for DaaS. Any type of engineering labs or users, students that are looking to have that have the need for higher end devices and are trying to connect in remotely to do homework after hours, after class is closed. That's a great use case. Again, happy to have that conversation further with you offline.
Yeah, Craig, one of the things that I would add to that is we got a lot of university customers. I just don't know off the top of my head which ones of them are using DaaS. I will say, though, that the beauty about a college is it's typically based on bring your own device. So that's perfect for a DaaS environment. They're not buying PCs for students.
I will go on record and say our solution is not always suited for K through 12 type of education, but you get into colleges, universities, higher ed, it's a great fit and solution. Typically, what we see with the K through 12 on the EDU stuff is that they're going through Google already.
I would just need a one pager, a case study to get the conversation started and get you guys some appointments.
All right. Reggie was asking about, is there different costs for different infrastructures built for different purposes? For example, is a infrastructure built for virtual machines for handling calls and or Office 365 versus one built for rendering or any kind of graphic processing like CAD or Premiere a different price structure?
dramatically.
Short answer is yes. Yep, absolutely. And the other thing I would add to that is there's no two customers are the same, right? So you're always going to see a variety of different pricing and components that come into the pools on those levers. But there are some standardized, estimates based upon seat types that we can provide for, ballpark pricing to get in the door, and then start, tightening down the bolts and nuts as we get in there deeper.
All right, last question. Licenses versus concurrent users.
I think I need to understand that question maybe a little bit more.
Yeah,
but
I think that you know what, we can support both.
Yeah, I was going to say
Actually.
that too, Gary. That's the mix and match.
That's like the contact center play where you have 3 sets of agents on 3 8-hour shifts.
Yep.
Yeah, that's that we can support that environment. So we're only giving them one license that 3 different people will use. Remember though, in each of those cases, when they log out, it has to erase everything and re-image a new desktop for the new person coming in.
So for John out there, I think the proper terminology would be non-persistent versus persistent desktops.
Yes.
Instead of the licensing. And that's where we have the ability to leverage either Citrix or VMware to deploy both. So depending on what their need is, we have options available to facilitate either or, would be the short answer. And again, reach out. Happy to have that conversation in further depth.
And we got to get ready to the dentist.
I think that was it. Zach, do you have any other questions out there? I think we covered them.
That's good. We're all good to go. Thank you everybody for staying on, and this was a great session.